Thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Ultra Auger Motor Pin Replacement Webcast. During today's webcast, attendees will be in listen-only mode. There will be a Q&A session at the end of today's call. If you have a question during the presentation, you may submit it online by entering it into the QA panel. If you're in full screen view, click the question icon located in the floating toolbar at the lower side of your screen. Simply type a question into the dialog box and click the send button. If you're in the split screen mode, the Q&A panel is already open and is located on the lower right side of your screen. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. If you are experiencing technical issues, please contact WebEx Technical Support. Our speaker today is John Kadike, Central Zone Technical Manager. John, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is John. Welcome to today's webcast. We're going to be doing a demonstration on how to use our auger motor pin replacement tool to replace the drive pin on a motor for a Bunn Ultra 2. Or if you happen to have an Ultra 1, it works for that as well. The kit number is 48401.1000. In the kit, you'll get the pin tool itself, along with this attached spacer. It also comes with 5 new motor pins. And these are the motor pins that are right here in the motor shaft. First of all, I want to cover a little bit about how these motor pins break. As you can see, the motor pin, the motor shaft itself slides inside the drive shaft and actually connects to our torsion bars in there. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, but I'll show you here in a second. It just slides in there like that. The pin that's sticking out of the shaft of the motor goes inside of a slot that's cut into the drive shaft itself to accommodate the gap there. Inside the drive shaft are the spacer that we use on the tool is actually torsion springs. So these torsion springs are right inside the shaft in that location there. So the motor goes right, clips right onto those springs. The idea behind these torsion springs is as the slush builds up in the hopper, puts a lot of drag on the auger, and it twists these springs, and that changes the correlation between this pin and this pin. The pins tend to get farther apart as the slush gets thicker and the springs twist. The problem comes in that we're talking about today when this pin breaks. Now, for starters, this motor really isn't strong enough to break the pin on its own, so it needs some extra help by getting bounced back and forth inside this slot that's in the drive shaft. So for the pin to break, the auger has to get locked up somehow. That happens when there's not enough sugar or when there's some product in the machine or something in the machine that doesn't have enough sugar in it. That causes the auger to lock up solid onto the drum. Then when the auger locks up solid, it releases and then locks up and releases again, and it keeps happening that way. And that causes this pin to bounce back and forth in that slot. As I said, the motor isn't strong enough to actually just break the pin on its own. For example, if you were to put this in a vise and turn the motor on, the motor isn't strong enough to break that off. If you think of it like a hammer and a nail, you don't take a hammer and push the nail into the board, but if you tap it just a little bit, it goes right in. Same thing with this motor here. If the motor is just pushing on the pin, it doesn't cause it to break the pin. But if you bounce that pin back and forth in that slot just a little bit, it'll snap right off. And that's what we're talking about today. So not enough sugar in the product, but also sometimes people have a tendency at nighttime, instead of taking the machine all the way apart, washing it and putting it back together, sometimes maybe they'll just dump water in it and let it run like a washing machine for a while and drain it out. If you do that, that's just straight water. With the refrigeration still turned on, it's going to lock that auger onto the drum and cause this to happen. Another important thing to remember is, as soon as this auger locks up and breaks this pin, the motor is still trying to turn and the auger is still locked up. So what happens is this part of the shaft is still connected to those torsion springs, and it ends up chewing the springs up inside. So every time you see a broken pin, make sure you replace the drive shaft. You do have the option, if you want to, there's a pin right there that holds this drive shaft together. You can knock that pin out, take that apart, put new torsion springs in there and put it back together. It's about a fifth of the cost of a brand new shaft itself. It takes a little bit of time. We don't have a tool for that, but this pin knocks out pretty easily anyway, so you can just knock it out with a punch. My recommendation is just change the whole shaft out. It's pretty, usually not worth your time to go through to rebuild the shaft. So I'm going to set this to the side. I just happen to have a motor here with a broken pin. I don't know the history of this, but so you see on this now the pin is broken off. It's flush on both sides. This side here, I can see the end of the pin when it was new, the flush side. And on this side, it's down inside there a little bit. It's the broken side. I don't think it matters either way which direction you go in pressing the pin, but this tool is designed to press the pin, or press the old pin out as it presses the new pin in. So you're just going to bottom this bolt out, and there's a hole in here that's at the right depth, and I'll show you that here in just a second. We're going to start by taking a new pin, and there's a hole at the end of this bolt here. So we're just going to put that pin in there, push it all the way down, and make sure that these threads here have grease on them. If you don't have grease on them, they can get locked up and end up locking the tool onto the motor itself. I'm just going to put this on here. I'm going to line up the pin with the end of the new pin, along with right where the existing pin is. Then I'm going to take the spacer here and put in that little duckbill shaped piece at the end of the slot of the motor shaft. I'm going to take an adjustable wrench. You can use a ratchet, probably works a little bit better, but I happen to carry these with me a lot. So from then on, I'm just going to start tightening it, making sure that it's going into the hole. Takes a little bit to get centered, but once it starts to go in, it's self-guided. Probably should have used a bigger wrench to get more leverage on this. Okay, so you see the amount of effort that I had to put into turning this in. You can imagine how it would be if you just had a hammer and a punch. So this tool, although it is a little bit of a struggle to tighten that onto there, much easier than using a hammer. So it's pushed this little piece out. This is the broken piece of the pin. It pushed it out down through this hole here. So I just take everything off there, and the hole in this bolt is the right depth. So once this bolt bottoms out on the shaft here, let me just show you with it out of the tool. Once this bolt bottoms out right like that onto the shaft, then it's flush on this side, and that's the right depth. So this tool, I'm not sure what the cost is, somewhere around $100, maybe a little bit more, but the time that it took me to change this pin versus the time that it would have taken if I would have had a vise and a hammer and a punch and all that kind of thing, save you a lot of time. So it's well worth it. Some people might be tempted to replace the entire motor because the pin is too hard to get out and get the new one in. So just to keep in mind, the pin cost about $1 and the motor cost about $500. So depending on who's paying the bill, you might want to check with them before you do that. So anyway, this tool, while it is an expensive tool, it's a specialty tool. So that's why the price is so high, but it's well worth it in your time in the field. So that's about all there is to it. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and type them in now. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions about this tool once you once you order one and have it in your possession, or if you're trying to use one and you run into some trouble, feel free to give us a call in our technical services department. We're going to put the number up on the screen. It's 1-800-286-6345. And we also have after-hours service in the evenings and on the weekends too. So if you're working outside of normal hours, feel free to still give us a call, and we can answer any questions that you have. So go ahead and open it up for questions now.
All right, the first question is, what is the part number for the tool?
Part number for the tool is 48401.1000.
And where do I get the tool?
Any place that you order Bun parts from. It's just a regular part number. We have them in stock, so however you order your normal parts, you can go to bun.com and order right from the website, or you can contact your supplier, any place you get any other Bun equipment or parts.
Is there a recommended lubricant for the bolt?
The lubricant that comes on that bolt is called Krytox. It's the lubricant that we provide in the preventative maintenance kit. That is also a part number. It's not on here. I don't have the part number for that handy, but it's the same lubricant that we put on this joint right here between this and the shaft. The lubricant that you get is it's in a little red cap. The grease is white. But I think any normal lubricating grease would probably work just fine. We happen to use Krytox because we already have that available to us. Any other questions? It's a pretty simple kit. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Once you get the kit, you kind of see how it works. Put the pin in there, and it's going to save a lot of headache down the road. Just as round numbers, the pin costs somewhere around $1, and the motor costs somewhere around $500. So in the past, people will change the motor because it is very difficult to change the pin, and you end up breaking the motor trying to get the pin out. So if you're working on Ultras out there in the field, it's a really good idea to get one of these tools. Might seem kind of expensive to make the investment up front, but once you use it a time or two, it'll pay for itself.
So you should say the shaft should be replaced if the motor pin breaks?
Yes, the shaft should be replaced if the motor pin breaks. Once this pin breaks, there's nothing stopping this motor shaft from turning all the way around inside of the drive shaft, which tears up those torsion springs that are in there. Now, generally what I recommend to people is, as far as your time goes, this you can change out in like 2 minutes. It might take you quite a bit of time to change out these torsion springs, but after you do replace the shaft, particularly if you work on these a lot, take these shafts and put them in a box somewhere and hang on to them, because you might have an afternoon to kill sometime, and you can sit down and rebuild a bunch of these shafts with new torsion springs. So that would make it worth your while at that point. But it's really up to you what you want to do, but that's just my recommendation based on what I've seen out in the field so far.
What's the purpose of the piece that you put in the tool at the start of the press?
What's the purpose of this spacer right here? And it actually is I mentioned it earlier in the video. These are the torsion springs that are in the shaft right here. So if you do take this apart, there's 2 pieces right here you'll be replacing to put it back together. The motor shaft has a slot in it, and there's sort of a duckbill. So if you can imagine like this slot, and as you're pressing the pin in, it tends to collapse the slot and changes the angle of the hole and kind of binds everything up. So by putting that spacer in there, you can press the pin in and it will go straight in. and flush.
Do you happen to have the part number for the pin?
Part number for the pin is 34836.0002. And this kit comes with 5 pins in the package also.
Why is the pin remover designed to be universal for the entire shaft and motor, or for the FMD and IMEX?
The question is, why isn't this tool designed to be universal? Mainly because we have different size pins. So if you look at the size of this shaft right here, this is significantly smaller than this. So this tool has a slot in it that could accommodate the smaller part, but it couldn't get around this larger part. So we don't have a tool for this one right here. As expensive as this tool is, it's a good value when used with this. But if we were to supply a different tool with this, or maybe even modify this one to accommodate this, the value wouldn't really be there. So it wouldn't, since it wouldn't be a value, nobody would buy it, and then kind of be a waste. The FMD motor pins are what they call roll pins. They're hollow and they push out very easily. You don't necessarily need a tool. So a tool would sort of make it harder to do than you could just do on your own. So that's the answer to that. Now there are pin press tools out there in the world that you can go buy that are all these sizes, because there are pins in all kinds of different motor shafts and everything else out in the world. So you can go research and find something that might fit these things. But I think you'd find it cost prohibitive. You're going to spend a lot of money on something that you won't use very often, and something that you could probably do without anyway. So, but if there's a high demand, I guess, if a lot of people want this tool, if we want us to redesign a tool, and a lot of people want to buy them, then maybe we can look into doing that. But we saw a need for this because of the difficulty of changing this pin. Is what the tool is really designed to overcome.
If I not have a tool, how do I replace the part?
Say it again, please.
If you do not have a tool, how do you replace the part?
If you don't have one of these, you'll have to get a vise, and you'll have to get something that fits in that slot to support that slot. As you set the vise up to press this pin out, you're going to have it open on the other side to accommodate the piece of the pin that you're pressing out. So if you have a large nut or something, maybe you could put it on this side and set it in a vise, and you can do it that way. Generally speaking, a hammer and a punch pin doesn't work because this pin grips inside that shaft so tightly. So, but by having a vise, if you've got a good sized vise and all the little attachments that you can put in there, it is possible and it's doable. It's not really doable in the field unless you have a vise on your truck or something like that, but you can certainly get away with it, yes.
One more time, the price of the tool and the part number.
I don't know what the current list price is. It's somewhere around $100, maybe $110. The part number for the tool kit that comes with the pins also is 48401.1000.
How can I request the part, or will you provide it and send us one? We can add that to the email.
What was that again?
Can I request the part? How can I request the part, or will you provide it and send us one?
Are you asking for something free? No, we won't be sending them out for free. If you want to order one, call the order department. They'll be happy to send you one. Credit card orders, or if you have an account. But we're not providing these tools at no charge, no.
The question, the question is, will the video be able on the Bunn Online Learning Center? Yes, there will be an email that goes out this afternoon with the link to the recordings of all the webcasts, including this one, and it should be it's a YouTube playlist. So, yeah, it will be on the BOLC as well.
And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the YouTube playlist. If you go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel, the Bunn channel, it organizes all of these videos, and not just these webcasts that we're doing. It's all the videos that we've been putting together for quite some time now. It really helps a lot. I mean, being a technician, it helps for me to watch somebody go through the motions of doing something rather than read some instructions on how to do it step by step. So watching those videos really crams in a lot of valuable training in a short amount of time. And available right on your phone. You can just go to YouTube on your phone and watch it as you get into repairing or doing a preventative maintenance on something that you're working on in the field.
What is the reason for designing the pin extractor after all these years since the CDS-1?
Since the CDS-1, well, the CDS used a roll pin. The roll pin wasn't difficult to get out of the motor pin. It wasn't a solid pin like this one is. The CDS only turned in one direction. When they redesigned for the Ultra, they really did a lot of research and a lot of testing and found out that by reversing the auger partway through the freezing cycle helps it freeze a lot faster. Consequently, with the motor going back and forth, it tended to push that pin back and forth and kind of walked it out. And if you have memories back that far, you might remember some of the problems we had with the Ultras where the pin would slide out and slice a nice groove in the torque sensor board right next to the motor. So that's why this pin was designed not to come out on its own, and that's why it's so hard to change.
Do you calculate the time savings with a punch and a hammer versus the pin extractor?
I have a formula. Do it both ways and write it down and subtract the difference. I know that's kind of funny, but with a hammer and a punch, it takes quite a bit if you don't break the motor pin or break the shaft in the motor in the process. If you're set up with a vise and the proper spacers and all that you need, which isn't that much, like I said, a nut or something like that to accommodate the other pin. A vise versus this tool, if you have them side by side, almost exactly the same amount of time. The difference here is you can carry this with you in your toolbox onto a site. You don't have to take the motor back to a shop where you have a big vise. A lot of the trucks that I've seen don't have vices on them. Some of them do. So if you have a vise on the back of your truck, you don't really need this. Just get some pins and you're good to go. But this is for the people who don't have a vise available. But as far as a hammer and a punch goes, good luck. I mean, it could take you 20 minutes, it could take you 2 hours. In my experience, the people that I hear from who try to do it that way end up just replacing the motor. And, you know, like I said, this motor costs somewhere in the neighborhood of $500. So if a technician isn't paying that bill, maybe they don't care about changing a $500 motor. But if you're the one paying for the parts, you know, whoever's paying for the parts cares about that difference of $499. So.
The locations are not doing proper PMs and letting the machines run low on product most of the time. Is that what causes a motor pin to break?
Okay, so low product, this question is, does low product cause the pin to break? I used to say no. Now we've been seeing some changes in product in the field that do cause that to happen. And I'll mention also dairy product. If a product has dairy in it, even powdered dairy, dairy tends to freeze in a different way than normal sugar does, and it can lock up that auger pretty quick, causing these pins to break. So even if you have product that has enough sugar, if you're breaking pins Take a look. If you have a mocha product that's got dairy in it, the product could need to be reformulated, or maybe that's not the right product for this machine. But the question centers on, does low product cause this? It can under certain circumstances. And just for an example, and I'm sure there are more circumstances, but just for an example, if you have a lower sugar Brix level, say down to 12 or 10 or something in that neighborhood, and I'm not talking about specific numbers here, so don't hold me to these numbers, but if you're in the lower range of the Brix level, and you have one hopper, for example, that's full and frozen, and the other hopper is low, you have a situation where the machine's pumping refrigerant. The product that's full and frozen doesn't have enough heat in it to burn off that refrigerant. So you have more refrigerant going to the barrel that's half empty. That tends to freeze frost on the surface of that drum and can make it easier for that auger to catch and get stuck that is necessary to break these pins. So there isn't like a chart to line out to say if you have this much Brix and this much product and this temperature that's going to break or not break. But those are some of the conditions to look out for. Higher sugar levels do a lot to prevent this problem from happening. So we generally design our equipment to go with as much product as we can across the board. But there's a lot of different formulations of product out there and a lot of different flavors and all of that kind of thing. So we do the best we can to make it accommodate everything else. But if you have low product, it can, under some circumstances, cause this problem to happen.
When techs do PMs, is a pin inspection recommended in the instructions?
During a PM, is a pin inspection required or recommended in the instructions? I don't believe the pins are mentioned except for to make sure they're clean. During a PM, you're changing a shaft seal that's in the front. Generally, you'll take this shaft out to do that, and you'll have this motor out. So during that time, you're going to see these pins, but generally speaking, this pin is either broken or not broken. It's not halfway broken. It's not bent over or things like that. I've heard of pins being bent. I've never seen one personally, but generally speaking, inspecting the pins don't really do much for preventing a problem. If you have a problem, it's just going to be broken. And the error that you're going to see on the screen, by the way, is a torque sensor error. So it'll either say right torque sensor error or left torque sensor error. A lot of people jump to the resolution of changing the torque sensor board because you have a torque sensor error. In reality, the torque sensor board is telling you have a problem that you only have one pin going around and not two.
When pin broken, can I change the shaft or replace the pin?
When the pin is broken, do you replace the shaft or the pin? You have to replace both.
Yeah.
If the pin is broken, you have to replace the pin, of course. When the pin breaks, almost always, not every single time, but almost always, ruins the shaft at the same time. So if you have springs in here in the shaft that are messed up because of a broken pin, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get you to see this on camera. I don't know if we can zoom in far enough, but this pin, as it goes into this slot of the shaft, and the next time you see a machine, you can look at this for yourself. It's pretty easy to spot. But when I slide this in there, the pin now, the motor pin that's inside of the slot for the shaft, is resting against the side of the slot that's closest to the other pin. So you have a slot, and that pin is touching the side of that slot closest to where that other pin is. If you see that pin drifting off in the middle somewhere in that slot, the springs are no good in that shaft and it needs to be replaced. But just as a good rule of thumb, if you see a broken pin, change the shaft. It's almost certainly either ruined or damaged, one of the two. This is really nice to have so many people on. We get a lot more questions this way. Because whenever you have a question and you bring it up, 10 other people are thinking about that. They just don't speak up and ask. So it's nice that we're getting so many questions. Is that all we have? All right, well, thanks for joining us, guys. I know this is a short thing, but this, I think it's really valuable to see how this thing works and to know that it's out there. And so if you have the need for one, if you're working on ultras, it's a really good thing to have. You don't have to use it too many times to be really grateful that you have it and get you out of a jam and make your day easier. So, excuse me, stay tuned for, what's another question?
Yeah, so here.
All right.
But it says, but you know you are on site and things need replaced, but have a concession is needed. I'm not sure on that question.
The question has something to do with concession numbers. If you're on site with a bun work order, I think the concession dollar amount is $250. This pin, this motor or drive shaft, sorry, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 list. I'm not sure how that pricing goes with the bun served work orders. I think there's a discount applied to that. But given that the most expensive part you're changing is $100, you shouldn't need a concession. It shouldn't really go over that limit. So if you have questions about bun serve and the restrictions and requirements, and maybe the question is more geared to having this tool or not having this tool. So if you don't have this tool, you will have to leave and go get something to change this with, whether it's a vise or some other way to change that pin. But generally speaking, bun serve isn't going to pay $500 to change a motor when the pin is the only thing that's broken. So having the tools available to do what you need to do, that's a conversation to have with the folks at bun serve and what their expectations are. I really don't want to speak to that because it's not my place to do that. But this is going to make your day a lot easier, and it's going to make going to make it possible really for you to do this repair on site in just a few minutes.
If the short shaft of the ice cap shaft has a notch in it, do you inspect the motor pin or replace the pin?
I think you're asking if this has a notch in it. Do you inspect this or replace this? That slot here, once that pin gets bounced back and forth in there, it'll put little dents in there, and you can see that happening. If that happens enough times, it's going to break the pin, causing the situation we're talking about today. But just because you see dents in here doesn't mean that anything's broken yet. It does mean that that pin is getting bounced back and forth in this slot, and you might have a condition that you need to talk to the customer about. Ultimately, earlier in the video I mentioned that sometimes people just dump water in this thing and let it run for a while and drain it out. If that's what they want to do to clean it, that's there's no rule against that. But if you leave the refrigeration on, it's going to cause this damage. So it's just a matter of having a conversation with the customer to find out what happened to cause this damage, these little dents, so that they don't end up breaking something later on. Other customers might pour in product and water at the same time and let the machine mix it. Well, that's fine too, as long as you have the refrigeration turned off. But if you have the refrigeration turned on and you pour straight water onto that drum along with the mix, if that mix doesn't get mixed up in like a half a second, you're going to end up with a situation that you could break the pin. So the damage that's caused, it's a matter of having a conversation with the customer to find out what they're doing, just to let them know not to do that anymore. That's all there is. It's not a matter of blame or anything else. They're doing something they believe is perfectly acceptable, and it's our job to let them know that they need to change that a little bit and keep the refrigeration turned off when they're doing things like that. And going back, just while I'm thinking about it, going back to the question we had a little bit ago about how to do this without the pin tool, if you would rather go to a hardware store and get a vise to put on your truck, you might be able to get a vise cheaper than you can get this tool, and that's a perfectly acceptable way to do that. This isn't a promotional video. We're not pushing and trying to sell as many of these as we can. We're just showing you that we do have it available and how it works. So if you would rather, and it would be more cost effective to get an actual vise and mount it to your truck somewhere, then that vise then could be used for all kinds of other uses too. So that might be a way more cost effective way to do it rather than buy this tool. Any more questions? All right, well, we're going to wrap this one up. This one's pretty short, but I really like all the questions. So look at that page with all the other webcasts, sign up, and just go look at the previous videos. And just remember, when we do these things like this live, every time you ask a question, that's a little bit more that we get to talk about, and other people are thinking about it too, and it makes things go a lot better, in my opinion. So feel free to sign up and engage and go through these things, and we appreciate you joining us. So I guess we'll see you next time.